think you're muted.
Welcome
There
to
you
this
go.
episode of the DGD podcast. Technical difficulties, guys, as always, it seems like. As always, this is your host, Robert Reynolds. And look, we got a good show today, guys. I wouldn't even say good, I'd say great show. And speaking of great, we've got a former UGA great wide receiver, guys, Juan Daniels. Juan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, man, I know we were talking offline, and, looking back when you played, you know, I felt like it was just something. I went back and watched your highlights, before the show, and got super excited. And it kind of led me what we're going to be talking about today. And I think it's a perfect time to sit here and focus heavily on wide receivers, whether it be in the past, obviously, during your playing days, or during, right now, right? I think you look at Georgia's receiver room right now, and it's as loaded as I've ever seen. So there's a lot to talk about with receivers and really the evolution of the offense. So for anybody listening, watching, it's a wide receiver show today. That's all I can say about it. But first, guys, before we get started, if you're on Facebook and you're watching the live show, make sure to follow this right here. There's a link. Actually, not really. It's not for. It actually is Restream. There we go. Let me take the graphic off here for the second so people can see. It is chat.restream.io/FB. That allows you to see when you comment who it is and things like that. That way we know who we're talking to, whether you're talking to Juan or myself. It helps us to know who we're talking to instead of seeing a Facebook user. So for the record, that is the link you will go to and comment. That way we know who we're talking to. With that being said, though, Juan, a lot of people, may have forgotten about this, right? You look at Georgia and what we're looking at today, right? You look at, talks about, really becoming a pass-happy offense. And, when you're playing days, you kind of fall back into that time where everybody was still in that same, run the ball, but still do some passing. But watching some highlights, when you were playing, that first year with Zaire, you really saw a lot of getting the ball down the field. And that's something that I really kind of want to see because as somebody that was running down the field catching passes from Zaire or Hines Ward, what are your thoughts on what the expectations are for the receiver room this year?
Well, I'm honestly, despite the injuries, I mean, we've had a lot of injuries in the receiver room, but you continuously have guys that are stepping up. And what I see now with JT Daniels being back there at the quarterback, he's got a lot of targets to throw to. We've got speed, we've got size. And so we can kind of get into that whole LSU with Joe Burrow. You've got the Alabama with the Tuas, and you've got those three receivers on both of those teams with the Ruggs and those guys with Alabama. Then you've got the Chase, the Bryces with LSU. Finally, Georgia this year with a great running game and great tight end play line, they're going to be able to do that and make some noise just like Alabama and LSU did the years before.
Obviously expectations are extremely high. And like you said, as a fan, I want to be on the level of, Burrow's LSU and look at last year, really statistically, Mac Jones had a better statistical year in that offense than even with Tua. But nonetheless, you credit for Tua and Mac Jones, those offenses. Both of them were really potent. And I think looking at the history here, everybody understands Georgia to be a run the ball first team. And, with Todd Monken coming in, and I think this might be the year that we really see the evolution take place. There's been hints of it, but we really never saw like true change. And my feel is this year, I think with what we've got in the receiver room, the depth that we have, and not even at the receiver position, you also have to include the tight ends and even the running backs. Looking at G-Day, I don't know if you watched G-Day, but we really saw you saw Zeus coming out of the backfield. You saw obviously James Cook and Kendall Milton, and all of our running backs were actually getting pretty heavily targeted out of the backfield. So to me, obviously it's a glorified scrimmage, and we might even talk about G-Day a little bit too. But, we passed it a ton. But what really stood out to me was, I liked seeing us get the ball out of the backfield and into the receiver's hands or the running back's hands and use them as a receiver. I've always thought that James Cook is a better receiving back. So obviously, I think you're going to try to get him into space. But what really stood out to me was seeing Zeus go out there and make those catches in space, and then utilize his strength and power in space. I think that's going to be something to take away, or at least that I took away. For your, from a receiving standpoint, obviously we passed a ton here. What were your key takeaways from what you saw? Obviously, we know it's a glorified scrimmage, so for the record, everybody, we get it. But there's always something to take away. What did you take away from this year?
Well, the biggest thing is, and one of the things that you actually touched on was the evolution. So if you think about Nick Saban, let's go back to Nick Saban when he had the McElroys. It was hey, we're going to run first with the big Derrick Henrys. We're going to get the ball to our tight ends. We're going to get the ball to our receivers down the field. But we just want to play good defense, and then we just want to slow the game down. But then you saw him evolve when you get the Lane Kiffins, and then you get Sarkisian in there to say, hey, we need to open up the offense. Well, unfortunately for Kirby in that national championship, you see that he had the same mindset as Nick Saban coming over from that Alabama, where you have a Jake Fromm. And Jake Fromm is not your gunslinger. He's not that guy that's going to go sling the ball down the field, but you play good defense, and then you just get the ball to your backs or your tight ends. In that national championship game, Nick Saban evolved. He went from going from Jalen Hurts, then he went to a Tua who just kind of opened up everything. And then so now what you're having receivers and you're having quarterbacks say, I want to go play for the Crimson Tide, which before that, receivers did not want to go to play for Alabama because they knew that they were just going to go there and they're mainly going to block. Quarterbacks, hey, if you want to be a game manager, get a good education from Alabama, that's the place you're going to go. So now it's changed. And now I see with Kirby bringing in Monken, that is actually starting to change to getting to the point where, hey, we're going to evolve. And that's what you saw in the spring game. You saw some great plays made by Burton. You had some additional plays. And I actually have here, some guys that, Kearis Jackson.
Yep,
played amazing. I mean, he had an amazing game. Jermaine, Burton, again, these are guys that are starting to step up because unfortunately we do have a couple of the injuries and those big play guys that are going to be out. So who's going to step up? You see Johnson stepping up. He had a touchdown at the end there. And you see JT Daniels being very comfortable with throwing the ball to these receivers. And you saw Mitchell making some great plays. And so once that is starting to happen, JT Daniels is going to get more comfortable. Guess what? The defense is going to have to loosen up. Now we can really run the ball and then have a complete offense. And those are some of the key takeaways I saw from the game.
Yep. No, listening to that, I completely agree. I think, the emergence of JT, right? I think it's really not even an emergence more so than it is the arrival.
Yes.
A lot of, obviously with the knee coming out of USC and things like that. Yeah, I applaud Kirby for what he did, being patient with JT. And I think that's going to pay more dividends than sitting here and trying to rush him onto the field. Because honestly, risking that re-injuring, I should say, it might be a small chance, but that small chance to me is way more risky than what the number would actually see. You could look at a 95.5, but that 5% is huge when you have the face of your program, as your quarterback, and obviously I loved what he did at USC, keeping up with modern day. He's always been that intelligent quarterback.
Yeah.
And he's not scared to throw the deep ball and throw 50-50 balls. He trusts his receivers is what, listening to one of his press conferences, Georgia's recruited a ton of receivers and an elite talent as well. And one of his statements, if I'm not mistaken, was, if you're not going to throw it up to him, don't recruit him. And I love that. I love
right.
that. Because to me, that kind of shows that moxie that he has, that he's not scared to throw it in, and he just trusts his receivers. And honestly, in my opinion, and I'm not knocking any quarterbacks in between that, obviously the last quarterback that I really saw that had a ton of confidence hitting the field anywhere was Aaron Murray.
Yes.
Most recently, in my opinion. Obviously Zaire was another one too, in my opinion, that he
Huge.
may have
Yeah.
been a little bit before my time, but still watching tape and watching old games and stuff. I can do that now. I was only 2, but nonetheless, you go back, you saw what I mean. He was not scared to throw it and trusted the receivers, and I think that's what's going to elevate Georgia, into this title contender, true title contender, and to the point where I think there's a really good shot that we do win, the national title here very soon, if not this year. But like you were talking about receivers, you have one of the things I love about this receiving core now is you have niches, in my opinion. So even with Pickens being out, you come in, you replace Pickens' spot with Eric Gilbert. He comes in and kind of fills in for Pickens, in my opinion. I think he starts with the X. So you sit there, you have a big body receiver, not willing to, not afraid to go up and catch 50-50 balls. But then you have Kieras that works better out of the slot in space. Arian Smith, the true speedster, world-class speed. There's just so much diversity, in my opinion. And I think that's what really makes this Georgia offense extremely scary. And if I was a defensive coordinator, I would lose sleep at night. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. You have matchup problems all across the board. Eric Gilbert kind of reminds me of a kind of a hybrid type of Kyle Pitts guy. What do you do with him? You can't cover him with a regular cornerback. It's going to be tough for a strong safety to come down on him. If he goes into the slot, a linebacker's not going to be able to cover him. So he's going to be a huge matchup problem. We've got a huge 6'7" tight end who is just going to be out of this world. But then again, you've got these speedsters in Smith. And then, you got these other guys that, what are you going to do? And then on top of all of that, you've got to worry about the running game. So there's so many things that you're going to have to plan for. So, unfortunately for Brent Venables, he's going to have a very, very tough assignment in that first game against Clemson, which, that's going to set the tone for our season. But, what do you do to try to stop all these weapons? And you've got a quarterback that's going to be able to get to spread the ball around.
I think with how much depth we have and the depth at running back as well, I don't think you can sit there and afford to double team anybody because if you do, you risk you have to take a rusher away, in my opinion. So really, the only team, in my opinion, this year that poses a true threat to our offense is Clemson, and it starts with their defensive line because you can give them 3 or 4 guys and put all their other linebackers on guys, and you can trust their front 4 to cause enough problems to get to JT. But after that, on paper at least, I should say on paper, really it's just a matter of there's so many weapons. They're so talented. You look at Eric Gilbert, you look at Darnell Washington. Both guys have tremendous size and really athletic for their size too. But then, you look into the depth where you have guys like A.D. Mitchell stood out. I don't expect him to play as much. I do see him playing some. I think this is a year that we can really rotate guys in, especially after Clemson. But you look at Arian Smith. Arian Smith, I think, is going to be a breakout star. And I think one of the key things here coming from a high school quarterback and myself, I watched JT, and I've went back and watched the Mississippi State game. I watched South Carolina game over and over. And one of the things that I noticed with JT is his knee. As he moved on, he got a little bit more comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. But with a full offseason and looking into this season, starting the year, I think what his mechanics is going to change. And what I mean by that is, plant your foot instead of kind of doing that little hop. You know what I mean? Right. And when that happens, that's going to give you the little oomph, if you want to say, to hit your guys in stride. And obviously the chemistry as well. You as a receiver, you understand how important chemistry is. So hitting these guys in stride and building that chemistry, especially when the viral California trip. I loved seeing that. I thought that was a great idea.
Yes.
And that's going to build that chemistry. And I think that's what we're going to see here. I think you're going to look at, you look at Arian Smith. We watched him time and time again either get underthrown. And that was obviously the true testament to his speed, but nonetheless, you have that kind of speed. You have to make people pay with it. And
he takes the top off, and you saw where he just missed him in that spring game. But just the fact of how far he was behind the defense, that was troubling. Just kind of reminds you of the Waddles,
Mhm.
of Alabama. Like if you've got somebody that fast, you've got to hit them, and it just completely opens up the passing game.
Yep, I agree. And one of the things that I love Arian Smith's speed, but one of the things that I really want to see and see how Monken does with Arian Smith, I want to utilize the route tree. Because you can take away the speed, putting a safety back. That's one thing. But I really want to see, his development and route tree. And I think he runs a great route tree already. Obviously, there's still development there. It can be polished. That's understandable. But I think, what's really going to make his speed and taking the top off the defense more scary is if you sit there, you lure your safeties in, to have to cover, whether it's in the slot, coming across, things like that. Obviously, everybody's going to fear that speed, but make them fear you and get him into space where you see wide receiver screens, kind of what Kieras is good at.
Yes.
Get that right there. Get him into space, and I think that's where it's going to be difficult for a defense to really stop us because
Yeah.
then you sit there, you have to kind of play up, then you can push them out deep, or you could sit there and then start utilizing your other targets. Look at Darnell in the middle because the slot's got to, or a cornerback or safety's got to account for Arian Smith or Kieras
Yeah.
out of the slot. So you sit there. I think that's the grand scheme of things where it's so much of a nightmare as a defensive coordinator because really, if you sit there and you utilize, I think Todd Monken's going to do it, but if you utilize all of your talent in the right ways and make them multidimensional, I think that's really what's going to make us, I think, a potentially historical offense. I think on paper, you look at that, and I think from a Georgia school standpoint, this is going to be an historic year. I just want to see if it transfers over to like a NCAA historic year. And I think
Yeah.
it could. Definitely has the potential, bearing injuries and things like that.
Yeah, well, you got a glimpse of it in the Cincinnati game. So in the
Mhm.
Cincinnati game where you're sitting there watching them use all of their weapons and using the big, huge tight end, I mean, it was he was a monster. And then it carries over into spring, and you see that they're continuing to build something. So if I'm a defensive coordinator from another team, I'm very scared. It's one of those be afraid, be very afraid. If I'm a Georgia fan, I'm over the top excited. I'm just completely excited about the potential and what's gonna happen. We're just gonna need to continue to have growth in the receiver room, which we're talking about, growth in the quarterback room. I know we're going to have growth with the linemen. Our defense has always been outstanding. So now this is our opportunity to, and our goal is not just to win the national championship this year. It is to be better than the 2019 LSU team, to be better than the 2020 Alabama team, to put us in the running of, wow, like these were the greatest teams of all time. Georgia now has the potential to do that with a Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback. Amazing running backs in the backfield. Zeus is just an absolute monster, running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield. You've got a receiver core that's out of this world. And if we at some point in time can get Pickens back, kind of like Jalen Waddle came back for the national championship, with against Ohio State. If we can get Pickens back, then it's going to be just trouble all around the board.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And obviously with Pickens, that ACL injury happened in spring practice, bringing in Eric Gilbert really kind of lessens the blow.
Yes.
However, you can't really you have to basically just try to find ways to fix the reproduction loss or the production loss, I should say. And and looking at it right here, I think Pickens does come in, and I think of it this way. Logically, after Clemson, even if we win or lose, I think you're still controlling your own destiny in regards to making the playoffs. Our schedule post Clemson, it literally screams you better win every game because it should be a blowout every time based off of what everybody else has lost, things like that. Then
it's going to be a rematch. I was talking to another good friend, and what's going to happen is win or lose after this Clemson game, which I do believe we're going to win, is who's going to improve and get better after that game. And the way our schedule is set up, especially after that Clemson game, it allows our line to get better. It allows our receivers, running backs, it allows our defense to improve and get better. So after that game, now we are improving and getting better to play that rematch in the national championship.
I agree with you. I think either team can still make it. The one team, in my opinion, the one team that Clemson has to worry about outside of us is North Carolina. Whether
Yeah.
they play them in the ACC championship, which I think that's probably what's going to happen. North Carolina this year is, in my opinion, is probably going to be the one team that they really, really need to make sure that they don't sleep on. Really, they about beat them a couple years back.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And that's without the talent that they've got right now.
Yeah.
Being from North Carolina, North Carolina has a bunch of momentum right now. Mac Brown has that team, full of talent. Obviously bringing in a couple recruiting cycles, bringing in Sam Howell, and really looking at it, they're loaded where they need to be. And I think if I think they really give them a shot or give them a problem in the ACC championship game. But nonetheless, Clemson's going to get better.
Yeah.
They're going to get better. DJ's going to get more game experience. I think we're fortunate to catch him as early as we did, or as we are, I should say, with him only having those 2 games of experience, true, real game experience. And, as a former player yourself, you can't replicate game experience. Practice is only going to do so much.
Right.
But nonetheless, even DJ, even when he was in the 2 games, DJ played very well.
Yeah, he didn't play bad. He didn't play bad at all. It was weird to see a Brent Venables defense struggle as much as they did, especially against Boston College. That was a little bit of a shocker.
It really was. It really was.
Yeah.
And obviously, look, Brent Venables is probably one, if not the best defensive coordinator in all of college football. And one of the things that I'm worried about is history tells me that Brent Venables has really never had a 2 bad back-to-back games.
True.
He always gets better from a bad. If he has a bad game, he's not going to have another one. So that's another thing that scares me. And obviously their defensive line with Brzee and Miles Murphy, KJ Henry, and all those guys. I think they're a little bit better than Georgia's defensive line. Now, I think they're close. I think they're really close. And Georgia's depth here is what really keeps it basically a push, in my opinion.
Right.
So it's definitely going to be a battle of the trenches in this game. But I definitely think that our receivers are going to have to cause problems for the secondary. And I think with what we've got on paper, even without Pickens, we can do that.
Yes. Yeah, we've got the speed. We've got guys that are going to be able to get open, find those soft spots in zones if they decide to go zone. And even with that big, talented defensive line, if we can just get some quick screens out or just some quick, 3-step drop plays, I think that we're going to be great. You take a guy like Smith that we were talking about before, and even if he's on the outside as fast as he is, I'd give him a couple of hitches. And what are you going to do with that? You're going to have to back off and give him room. You can't come up there and press him. And if you bring a safety over the top, now you're leaving the other side of the field wide open. So I would actually just kind of use him to kind of set the tone for the offense, especially for the passing game.
Looking at it right there, I think one of my key takeaways from this past season, obviously, it's really a tale of 2 teams last year. You have pre-JT and then post-JT. But transitioning over to this year, I think one of the biggest takeaways, in my opinion, is the need to hit the tight end more. You saw Todd Monken's offense. He schemes guys open. He does it extremely well, in my opinion. But obviously, this is where the lack of off season last year really took its toll on us. Everybody had the effect and felt the impact of no off season. However, when you're installing a new offense and the radical evolution that we are experiencing makes it a little bit more difficult. So it kind of makes sense why Stetson Bennett was a guy, why Dwan Mathis was kind of struggling the way he did. Unfortunately, obviously, I want to wish him well. But I think that caused some problems. But obviously, it's like JT comes in and it's just like a different team. So transitioning this year, I think we need to hit the tight ends more. Yes. I think they're open. I saw Darnell open, especially in the Cincinnati game. Saw him open time and time again. But obviously, towards the end of the game, you started to see Darnell get involved, and JT found him open. And I think with the chemistry that they're building, the California trip that was discussed a little bit earlier, JT's going to see that, and I think that's he's going to make teams pay for leaving these guys open. He's going to find the open man. That's really, in my opinion, what's going to be the key here. One, offensive line giving JT enough time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't throw the ball if you're on the ground.
Right.
But
right.
two, trusting his receivers, which he does, and making the right reads. He's a very smart quarterback. So I think all things line up. Really, just it depends on the offensive line, being there to protect him enough to get the ball out, and I think that's what's going to happen. So
he's got great pocket presence. One of the things that JT does very well is that back shoulder throw. I mean, he is amazing at it. He and Pickens did a great job of hitting that back shoulder throw. You saw a little bit of that in the spring game with I can't even think of his last name right now. But you saw a little bit of that. One of them he dropped, but the other ones, he was able to complete. Mm-hmm. So him having that, JT has great pocket presence, pocket movement. With his knee being 100%, is going to be even better. I think he'll work the pocket very well just to get those guys, make sure that those guys get open. And just like you said, I'm a huge fan of getting, the ball to the tight end. Just making sure that you find him, and our tight ends can run. I mean, those guys they can run, they can bowl you over, and then even in that Cincinnati game, where we have a tight end running down the sidelines, it took about 4 or 5 times for them to even get him down, and he almost scored. So if we can take advantage of that, there's so many things that Monken has that just completely opens up everything to now it's just going to be hey, who's going to eat this week? Because if you try to take away the tight ends, the receivers are going to eat. You try to take both of those away, the running backs are going to eat. That helps out the line. I mean, there's just so many things that we can do to cause tremendous trouble for a lot of these defensive coordinators.
Now, obviously, I want to make sure that people listening and tuning into this understand. We've talked a ton about the pass game. Do understand that we're still going to run the ball for a while.
Yes.
Please make sure that you remember that we've got Zeus and Cook and Milton and McIntosh and Dejan. Yeah. We're going to run the ball too. And so I think
but I like it. So if we could have a lot of people had a huge misconception about Steve Spurrier. Steve Spurrier, they just thought he was just this pass happy guy and all he wanted to do is throw the ball. But if you looked at the stats, it was 50-50. He just passed a lot in the beginning to open things up, and then he would run just as much as he passed the ball. So this year, we have the ability to do that. We have the ability to kind of mix it up, whereas in the past, you kind of see Georgia as maybe a 70-30, kind of 60-40, and almost, kind of predictable. Hey, let's run the ball on first down. Let's run it on second down. Now let's try to throw the ball. Now we have the ability to, if we want to throw the ball on first down, we can throw the ball on first down.
I'm looking at it this way here. Obviously Georgia's been predictable. Really, when James Coley was here, it was an 80-20 in my opinion. Yeah. Like I could sit here. What really gets you worried is, as a fan, I can sit here and say, run, pass, 3 and out.
Yep.
And then it happens. And so obviously, the transition, to me was welcomed. But to me, you have to keep a realistic expectation. You're not just going to go from – for instance, like that said, the 80-20 split. You're not going to go from 80-20 to 60-40 pass in 1 year. Right. You could try. I just don't think it's successful. When you talked about Spurrier, and you played a little bit. You played against him a little bit. I think maybe a year or two, I think.
Yeah, I actually all 4 years I was punished by him.
Well, yeah. I mean, as Georgia fans, we know those years. It was rough. But, but nonetheless, obviously you're not a defender. However, you were on the field. You saw it. And some of my older fans, not trying to throw shade at age or anything, but you know what I'm talking about. If you were old enough to witness these games, kind of going back and watching them, right? You either pass the run game open or you run the pass game open. I think the way the college game is right now, you have to pass the run game open.
Yes.
Georgia has historically ran the pass game open, if this makes sense.
Yes.
And I think now we're going to see that change. And we're going to really evolve into a modern college football team. And I think that's what's going to be – and that's what's been needed, I think, to take that next step, right? Even in 2017, we got one play away from winning the national title. Now I think with the talent that we have and the offensive scheme, Big keyword there, scheme offensively. You set that in place. I think now you have all the tools to build the house. Build it.
Right, right. And the other part too, going back to that 2017 is we started off very aggressive, and then we just kind of played not to win, or sorry, not to lose. And historically, that's how Georgia's been. And love Mark Richt, was a great guy, but when he had an opportunity to kind of beat some teams into the ground so that we can get more players in and to develop them and so we can move on, we didn't take that opportunity. We just kind of barely won the games. We just kind of barely did what we needed to do. And so if you looked at it, there wasn't a lot of teams that would look at our schedule and be like, oh, man, we got Georgia, we're scared. Whereas you look at now, who wants to play Alabama? Who wants to jump up and say, hey, I want Alabama? You don't want Alabama. You don't want Clemson's. And so we just need to have that dog, so to speak, in us to where teams just look at the schedule and like, oh, man, I do not want to play Georgia this year. So that's one of the things when you're just talking about, going back to that 2017, we had our foot on the gas and we kind of let up. We need to start, putting our foot on the gas and then just blowing it out.
I'm glad you're saying this because I have spoke this ad nauseum for several years now. You look at 2017. I mean, really, let's be honest about any game. I think even last year, like with the offense that we had, my thought process for this year with what we're bringing in, we need to score 50 points. That's our goal every single game.
Yes.
And you even look when JT, and this is what really upset me. I'm not mad because we still won, but I wanted a game this past season where we set and made a statement. You look at Alabama, you look at LSU, you look at Clemson, Ohio State. Oklahoma, what did they do? They run the score up on you, and they make a statement out of you. You look at Clemson, what they did to Georgia Tech a year or two ago.
Was it 73 to 7 or
73 to 3 or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was them even rotating guys out. That just shows you like this is why we're here and this is why we're not leaving.
Right.
Georgia has this kind of mentality. I feel like from a national standpoint, where we're contenders, but you have air quotes. If we make a statement game, if we have to sit here and make a statement game. One, I think our statement game comes if we beat Clemson. That's a statement game, no matter what the score is. That's one.
Right.
After that, you have to win double digits and you have to win handily because of what everybody around us has lost. You look at Florida, even Florida. I understand the cocktail party. I understand it's a huge rivalry game. Things can happen. It doesn't matter. You have to put the pedal to the metal, like you said.
Yep.
Don't let up and just try to demoralize, right? Demoralize your opponent.
Yeah.
And until we do that, we're never going to get this same, playing field and looked on this pedestal as if you were an Alabama or, a Clemson. And I think, honestly, once we do that, and we had opportunities last year and we floundered it. Like we had a chance to sit there and score. We were at the 1 yard line and we nailed it. Sure, you could look at Muschamp, and obviously I'm glad he's here as an analyst.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's South Carolina. Basically, just do what Georgia does: win games, dominate, bury them. And that would have put us over 50 points. In my opinion, I was sitting there excited. Even though late fourth quarter, Dejan was running very good, I was excited. And then we got there and we just kind of just nailed it out. And I'm like, this right here tells us we came here to just get the hell out.
Yep.
We dominated for 3 quarters, coasted the fourth, got the hell out of there. I want to sit there from 60 minutes left all the way down to the final, the 0 on the clock. Dominate, score when you can. Play as if it's the first quarter when you're 0-0.
Right.
That right there, that mentality change. You hear attack the day. That doesn't scream attack the day if you're sitting there and you're not making statement games when you have the opportunity to do so. You need to do it to really make a statement for not just Georgia, but all of the NCAA.
Yeah, you're right. And just think about it. If someone had an opportunity to do that to us, they would do it. And
absolutely.
And, going back to 95, we were losing to, when Spurrier was at Florida, they played us at home. They were about to punt the ball, and the offensive coordinator calls down and says, "Hey, Steve, I just wanted to let you know no one has ever scored 50 points in Sanford Stadium." He called a timeout, threw a post to Chris Doring, and they ended up having like 50-something points. He goes, "Now somebody scored 50 points." And so he was the kind that if he had an opportunity to bury us, he buried us. If you go back to those days of Tom Osborne in Nebraska, if they could score 100 points on you, they would try to score 100 points. And that's why they were so dominant through these years. And that's why Alabama's and Clemson's and LSU's have been dominant, because they are trying to bury each and every team. And no one fears Georgia like they fear Alabama. No one fears Georgia like they fear Clemson.
Now, don't get me wrong, there is a sense of fear here for other teams, but it's not on the same level that you could. Right. And to your point here, there was a lot of hate towards Spurrier, and not just from a Georgia standpoint in general.
Yes.
But one of his, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I may not be 100% accurate on this, but if you don't want to see us score, stop us.
Yeah. That's what he said. He said it's not my job to stop scoring. It's your job to stop us.
Yeah, and that mentality right there is what Georgia needs, especially this year with all the talent across the board. We're loaded with speed on defense. I'm one question on my defensive side of here is replacing Aziz, and he was really underrated in setting the edge.
Yes,
and obviously you look at what we've got coming back. You've got Nolan, you've got Adam Anderson, which I think is going to be more of a pass rush niche. Who's going to set that edge? And I think that's my biggest question there. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, across the board, you're set with speed. You've got experience along the front four, experience in the linebacker core. A little bit of inexperience there, but you bring in two guys, Darian Kendrick, Tyke Smith, with game experience, shore up that experience gap in the secondary. There's really not a ton of questions there defensively. Dominate on defense. Stop this, kind of have a typical old-fashioned Georgia defense. Stop them, be tough, gritty, things like that.
Right.
Then you go on offense. Really, my only question is left tackle. I've came on to say that I think Jamari Sawyer should be your left tackle for Clemson, and then you kind of the rest of these games you sit here, you test out your right guys. I think Amarius Mims. I think Amarius Mims is going to be your left tackle. Just thinking about, the guy is a mountain of a man.
Yeah,
athletic and really great in pass.
He can move.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he can move.
So obviously you want experience. Kirby has proven time and time again. History tells you. Experience, and especially in these big games. I love Jalen Carter to death. He's an animal. He didn't even touch the field until, almost all the way through the first quarter into the second. Right. He values experience that much. That's why I think Clemson's going to be a true litmus test for us, especially, and we're going to see where we stand there, and as we go on, how we develop. But but this is a team right here that should instill fear across the NCAA. And I think like I said, to a degree, there is. Like I said, we have a ton of receiving talent that Georgia is not familiar with. Just a couple years ago, we lost 5 of our top, our top 5 guys, and then a couple transfers. We're basically playing our 7th man up. And so no one feared our pass game. Now you have to respect our pass game. Yeah. Everybody fears and respects our run game. But now how do you handle that, which we've obviously talked about too. This is the year to instill that cutthroat, like step on your throat, not let up. You have to instill that this year. This is the year of all years. This has got to be a thing because the talent is there, the scope of the NCAA. You look at the teams around you. Bama lost a ton of talent. They're they're reloading. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Ohio State, no Justin Fields. You got C.J. Stroud, no Justin Fields. Trevor Lawrence, even though DJ is going to be a great quarterback there, that you lose that experience from Trevor and Travis Etienne. The teams around you have lost, and they're going to have to rebuild. They're going to reload and rebuild. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But now's the year that you sit there, you bring so much experience back, so much production back. You have to capitalize. And I really want to see that statement game over and over again to make people respect Georgia based off of fear alone.
Right. And we have the momentum. We really do. Again, coming off of that Cincinnati game, Cincinnati was a great team, and I think Cincinnati's going to be really, really good this year. So that wasn't just a cakewalk game. That also wasn't a game where we just kind of took plays off or just decided to ourselves, hey, this is not a great bowl game, so we're not going to play hard. I mean, Cincinnati brought it, and then we also brought it. Carry that on to the spring, and then now as we're going to start this season, bringing that momentum into Clemson, that they have, I think they have a lot more to fear than we do. And we're basically riding high. They come off of a pretty much a beatdown by Ohio State, who a lot of people felt like Ohio State shouldn't even be here because they didn't play enough games, and they didn't really necessarily prove themselves. And for them to come out there and beat a very well seasoned Clemson team, and not just beat them, but just beat them down, they're still reeling from that. So why not Georgia? Hey, let's go take advantage of that. Let's, because that's the last thing that they had on their mind. The last thing we had on our mind was an excellent game, comeback win against Cincinnati, a great spring. Now we've got guys that are going to, have to step up. We've got, Pickens down. We got a couple of injuries, but now we've got some guys that have to step up. Both sides of the ball. Let's go after it. And this is our chance.
Looking at that Clemson game, that kind of game is what I like to call an ass whipping game. So to put it nicely, that was rough. I mean, and I brought on Aaron, one of my friends, Aaron from Fifth Quarter Clemson, and we talked about that. We also talked about Brent Venables. Excuse me, Brent Venables and his ability to rebound back, and that's. I'm going to say there's a lot to fear about Clemson. I think they brought back so much talent as well. Now they lost key pieces, but they're still bringing back a lot of experience, right? Like most of their defense outside of Darian Kendrick is returning, and even their depth is returning, and they've played meaningful games and experience there. However, losing Trevor Lawrence, is a big deal. I don't care if you got DJ Uiagalelei behind him, still a big deal.
Right.
You lose ETN. I think Will Shipley, out of North Carolina, Will Shipley could be an X factor for that in that running back room. I know you got Lynn J. Dixon, but there's still that kind of a drop off until we see otherwise, right? I think.
Right.
So I'm not going to discredit Clemson by any means. I think they've earned their right to be a feared, respected team, national title contender. There's no question about that.
Absolutely.
But we have to take advantage of some momentum, and we have to be prepared. I looked at Clemson. I looked at the Cincinnati game as a really big wake-up call for me as a fan, because it shows me that while, the grand scheme of things, we have the resilience to come back from a deficit. People look at it, you hear people outside of the Georgia fan base, they were like, dude, you were getting beat by Cincinnati. Like they're not a top 10 team. Like
they're pretty good.
That's one of, now obviously you can hear about the opt-outs and things like that. I don't want to hear it. Sure, I don't think they had a lot of opt-outs at all for Cincinnati. They had more to play for. They had, they beat Georgia.
Yeah.
Obviously you get that, damned if you do, damned if you don't. You should have beat them. You lose to them. Why did you lose to them? I don't like that narrative. I really don't, because I look at it this way. You take two top 10 teams and you put them together. There's a reason why they're a top 10 team. They're not overrated. They were a very damn good team. Luke Fickell's got that team basically spinning, greased wheels and everything. He's got that team moving. So there's a lot of things that people try to spin to make Georgia look bad here. And, I think we could have played a better game. I really do. I felt like we were unprepared, and you taken away what we had opt-outs wise. This is the adaptation, and full scale what the adaptation means. If you have guys out, whether it be injury or, in this case, opt-out, next man up. And now, obviously, when it came down to it, we last second won, but a win's a win for one. And two, these guys that, obviously opted out, you gave them some very meaningful, high important game experience.
Right.
High level, playing a top 10 team. That's just what it is. So I kind of laugh at that. I understand that we struggled. But you have to look at we struggled, but we also came back and we stopped them in the second half. Outside of that touchdown run, they didn't do shit in the second half.
Yeah, that was
they didn't do nothing. We shut them down defensively.
Yeah, we played big time on that. And like you said, just building off of that momentum. One of the things, too, that I'm looking at is if you look at that Clemson-Ohio State game, Clemson really struggled with those tight ends. Those tight ends really, really did a number on those. So that's something that, we have to look at. The receivers played great. I think that if we're matching up receivers versus that team from last year, I think we've got an edge on that. I think we've got an edge on the tight ends. Of course, you're bringing in Eric Gilbert as well. But our running backs, we really, really have an advantage over that. So if, again, looking at that game based off of what we have right now, and what Clemson is losing, we should have confidence. I'm not saying that we're going to go over there and steamroll Clemson, because they're going to be prepared. And like you said, that they've earned the respect, but we should really just kind of have a chip on our shoulder, just kind of have a confidence going into that game to, like you said, make a statement game. And then after that, we need to continue to make statement games, because again, with Alabama and everybody just kind of reloading, this is our year to take advantage. And it kind of reminds you of LSU. LSU kind of came out of nowhere, really. But guess what? They took advantage of people reloading and people, just kind of getting back to the top to where they were before. Kind of shocked a lot of people.
Yeah, I remember that season with LSU. I watched that Texas game, and for me, I thought it was kind of a lucky game almost.
Yes.
Now, This is at first. So hear me out. At first, this was early in the season. Nobody really expected Burrow to do his historical year. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. We knew they had talent. It's just we didn't know that it was going to be that level of production. So watching that game, it was like you saw Burrow, like basically just like make the throws that he did. As a quarterback, I was in shock. I was like, he threw that like he basically had the balls to throw that, and he scored a touchdown off of that. I was like, what? I was like, no way. So I was like, I thought it was just a fluke. And then next thing you know, you start to see him just over and over. That built their confidence so much, and they just went off and had a historical season. I was just like, okay, you kind of just one of those, like,
even against Alabama, because if you think about
that
it,
was insane too.
Kind of been in LSU's head, over and over again, and they went there and they put it on them. And the score obviously didn't look like it, but they really, it was 33-12 at the half. They really put it on them.
You watched that game, I did too.
Yes.
As well as I do, that this is why you don't look at scoreboard. If you're really wanting to get a true in-depth analysis on something, don't look at the final score. Watch the game.
Right.
And there was no question to me that LSU dominated them throughout the entire game.
Right.
I felt like they gave up a little bit. They coasted, and it about cost them.
Yes.
They still managed to pull that win off, and then they just didn't let up the rest of this year. They just put their put their foot on their throats and just killed everybody else. Right. Even in Georgia. I take it this right here. Moral victories don't mean anything. But to hold them to 37 points, I felt like was some type of a moral victory.
Yeah, right.
Because that team was historic.
They were great. But I say that really to say that Georgia has the weapons. They have the schedule. They have everything set up to have an epic year like that. There's no different from the LSU versus Texas as this Georgia versus Clemson. And it may be one of those games that it's going to go back and forth. But we need to close that game out and then just go and then improve and get better. Like you said, just, whoever you want to put at the tackles, and these receivers and the defense, everybody steps up. We've got some good transfers that have come in that I think that are going to make a huge impact.
Absolutely.
We've got the coaches. We've got everything is in place. We just need to go and just bury each and every team.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end this up right here for this part of the conversation. All we got to do is put our foot on the throats and not let up. And I think that's what's going to propel us to where we really want to be as an end result, and that's national title.
Right.
We have the pieces there. We just gotta instill the mentality, and that's harder to do than getting the pieces, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So we've talked enough, Georgia. Here, I want to talk personal here. I know your son, and obviously he didn't commit to Georgia, but he did commit to Stanford.
Yes.
So I want you to talk up a little bit right here, because look, he plays for Buford, and a lot of my audience here is obviously from Georgia. I'm obviously from North Carolina, but Buford, we know, and we talked a little bit about this offline too. Buford's loaded right now. They just come off a state title, and your son was a quarterback, obviously on that team. Obviously Georgia fans are kind of keeping their eyes peeled for Jake Pope. There's a lot of talent there. So how are you feeling when your son committed to Stanford? I guess this is from a father to father here. What were your thoughts when he committed to Stanford? Obviously you playing from Georgia. What were your takeaways from that? Did you feel any kind of way that he didn't commit there, or I just want to kind of get a feel for it? Did the ego get hit when he didn't commit to Georgia? Or
No,
like
not at all. I mean, it was actually unreal, to be honest with you, because just the fact that Stanford was actually looking at him, considered the Harvard of the West. I'd like to say that I was too smart to get into Stanford. That's why they didn't recruit me. That's a joke. That's a buddy of mine, Lee Chambers, that I coach with. He says that all the time. So I had to steal that from him.
Not even mad about that.
But it says a lot about the Buford program. It says a lot about the Buford education. The fact that they pour from an education standpoint of their students, for him to be recruited by a Stanford, which is it's just amazing in itself. Coach Shaw is amazing. Coach Tavita Pritchard, who is the offensive coordinator and the quarterback. Coach Pritchard and I talked probably maybe 45 minutes. Our very first conversation, we're laughing, talking offense, strategy, and I just kind of fell in love with the whole idea of my son going out there and playing. His mom was super excited about it. So just the fact that he has an opportunity to play Power 5 D1 football is actually pretty cool.
No, obviously, like if my son were to get a scholarship offered really anywhere, I'd be super happy about it. Yeah. So, the fact that it's Stanford and their academic prestige, looking at that right there, I didn't play college ball, so I'm going to take it off my take here. But obviously, as a college player yourself, education can't be taken away from you, in my opinion. They can't take away that. Ultimately. So I know we're getting on a little personal level, if anybody's listening, but athletics is only going to take you so far. In my opinion, education is longer. They can't take it away from you. So, I love the fact that he's going out there, he's getting the opportunity to play football. Obviously, at a really high level. Stanford recently obviously put out several players. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey, Andrew Luck, things like that. Just obviously a couple noticeable names there. But their academic prestige really sticks out more than their athletic prestige, and that, in my opinion, is a better, I guess you could say, basically a, I don't even know how to say it. It's result, definitely more important, in my opinion. It's more important.
And I was fortunate to play at Georgia. I was fortunate to get a scholarship, but my mom told me, when I got the scholarship, she's like, "I'm excited for you. This is awesome. If you go up there and you don't get your education, I'm going to kick your butt," so to speak. And so I was more afraid of my mom than I was of linebackers and safeties and or anybody else. So that was a huge priority. So the fact that he can say that he's got a Stanford education says a lot, just about him. And they just put, a guy, Davis Mills. He just got, to the NFL from, being a quarterback. So they're going to develop him, and that's one of the biggest things that I'm more excited about, is just developing him as a person and as an athlete. I mean, I can't beg for a better situation.
Oh, no. Obviously, I think Georgia, in my opinion, just taking a look at their business school, definitely a good business school.
Yes.
I don't know what your son's majoring in or what he plans to, but I think Stanford just speaks for itself outside of football, and really within football too. You can say that too now. But, obviously, look, we've been going on for close to an hour now. Juan. So I wanted to kind of wrap things up here. For one, I wanted to thank you again for coming on, speaking some, obviously some perspectives from a former wide receiver yourself. Obviously, guys, look, go check out my man's tape. I loved watching his highlights. You'd be surprised. Look, just because he played back in the early to mid 90s doesn't mean that there's not some good plays that I saw there.
Don't let the leather helmet distract you. That's
right. Now, look, I saw some plays that Zaire was throwing, and Hines Ward was throwing to you,
and Bobo as well. So Bobo,
Bobo too.
Auburn,
Bobo was 95, I think it was.
90, yep, yes, he was.
Yes, because you had Zaire, then
Zaire,
and then
I had
Bobo.
Zaire first, then we had Bobo. When Bobo got hurt, we had a guy, Brian Smith, and then he got hurt. Then we had to have Hines Ward in there. So
everybody remembers Hines Ward because of his basically a Swiss Army knife type mentality.
Yes,
and how he was just able to do that. But look, I love, obviously looking back, and obviously I'm too young, but for me, going back, I loved watching Zaire sling the ball. It was just something about it. It was just fun to see. It kind of reminds me of JT, but a little bit
He
different, obviously.
he. When I tell you there is an exact, it's an exact same thing as Eric had. I mean, they both mirror each other. I mean, Eric just came out there. He just had complete command of the offense. He just made you a better player. He just had that confidence about him. And I remember one time where I think we were playing Georgia Tech, and he scrambles out of the pocket, and there's linebacker is coming to tackle him, and he goes up there and just runs right into that linebacker. And we all just jump up and we're like, yeah, and you're looking like that's the leader of our team right there, the leader of the offense. And he's willing to go up there and take hits and deliver punishment. So why would we not want to go out there and, just do the same thing?
Absolutely. I'm going to ask before we hop off, I'm asking you one question here. I want to get a prediction here. Which receiver this year has their breakout year, leads the team in receiving?
I'm going to go with Burton.
You think Burton?
I'm going to go with. I know that he is a little bit nicked up, but I'm going to go with him. I love everything about his game. I mean, he finds a way to get open. He's deceptively fast, but I think that he's the one that's going to really just kind of. I love Arian Smith, but that's going to be the person that's going to get a guy like Burton open. So it's going to be, who's going to be able to make the plays? They're going to force Burton to make those plays, and he's going to make them. I'm excited to watch it.
I have a feeling of 1,000-yard receiver here, and obviously at one point you had roughly almost 2,000 yards receiving in your career. It's crazy to think of this, that kids can have, or at least Bama had on par for 1,600 yards in a season. That's crazy to think, ain't it?
Yeah, but guess what though? I really feel like coming up, that's what Georgia's going to end up being, because if you look at the progression and the evolution, is Kirby came from Alabama to where Nick Saban decided to, hey, if I'm going to continue to win championships, I have to evolve. And then now Kirby's kind of doing the same thing, and he's getting some big time receivers that are coming in. He's getting quarterbacks that are coming in, and just like you talked about, we need to put our foot on these teams' throats. That way we can get the Carson Becks in there, the Brock Vandergriffs, and everybody else some good game time experience, so that again we're reloading, just like Tua to Mac Jones. We need to have that same situation. JT Daniels, we go win a national championship. Now we've got a Carson Beck or Brock Vandergriff. Now we're going to go, compete for another national championship. So
absolutely. Hey, look. So obviously, if anybody's listening or watching, where can everybody find you, man?
I'm in Buford. I'm in. Are you talking about my handles?
Social media. Yeah, social media.
I'm on Facebook. I'm just Juan Daniels on Facebook, and it's John Mega 12 on Twitter, and it's just Juan Daniels on Instagram. So definitely give me a follow, especially during this Georgia football season. It's going to be exciting. I can't wait to tweet and post and do all this. This is going to be our year. I'm calling it here. You've heard it here first. Georgia will beat Clemson that first game. Georgia will win the national championship.
Hey, look, if you're around the Buford area, you know where he is now. So go check him out and see if you can catch him around.
Catch Buford football. They're going to be pretty good this year too. So
look, I'm sure they will. I see that coming. Yeah, obviously being from North Carolina, I just have to kind of look at the grand scheme of things. You're down there in the weeds, so I have to take your word on that one.
But we do play. I can't think of the name of the team that we do play from North Carolina. They're actually coming to us, but I think they're pretty good.
A team from Charlotte or something.
Yeah, it is. It's the Charlotte team.
Not Independence. I'd have to think about it. We'll talk about it offline. I'll find out who it is.
Okay. Cool.
I know there's some really good teams in Charlotte. Good teams in Charlotte.
Yes, there are. Yeah.
That'll be interesting to watch. Hey, look, that's all we got for today, folks. Look, Juan, thanks again for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you and hearing your insight and experience on the receiver position. Look, love talking receivers. Guys, everybody knows Georgia's loaded with receivers. What better way to sit here and talk about a receiver episode than bringing on a Georgia great himself?
Thank you. Love it. Hey, and go Dogs, man. I can't wait.
Sick 'em. All right, guys. That's all we've got for today. Obviously, great show with Juan being on. And like I said, pleasure to have him on. And thanks again. And on that note, though, guys, have a great weekend. If you're listening to it on today, Friday, Have a great weekend or have a great day whenever you do listen to it. That's all for today's show. Stick around for the next episode of the DGD podcast. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.